semicolon here, which Kurt Vonnegut says he never uses. I lived in Spain. That is the signature of a Spanish caballero, a Spanish gentleman. It's usually capa y espada, cape and sword. And under Francisco Franco, where I was first living there, it was against the law to wear a cape. So I went out and walked on in 1967, and I went into strangely, the first film I was ever in, a picture of me in the back. It was called Marauders, the Desperados. My students were, I was actually a dialogue coach and an actor in that film. That's enough. I mean, I've done an awful lot of stuff. I really bored the hell out of myself, frankly. I published a book, the last book of poetry. I have these books for sale. And frankly, these two little books were out of print for 45 years. Students of mine were paying a lot of money. Gertrude Horvath heard them as, I considered a rare book. And they were paying over $100. I'm selling these for $10 a piece because my publisher's brother found a box of them in his closet last year when he died. So I thought, spread them around. This one is called Rudy 2. And it has to do with, right. It has to do with runes. And rune, of course, meant the secret whispering in your ear. It was magic. When you went to the Weird Sisters, who were called Wicca or witches, you had your weird told, which meant your destiny. And they would throw the bones of the stones and accumulate the patterns of the runes to tell you what was going on. The original poetry in English from the 8th century was called, the poetry was called gnomics, or the sayings of gnomes and elves. And they're never more than 2 or 3 lines long. I hope it doesn't shock you, but it's in the beginning of this book, that the oldest poem in the English language that a young Viking would remember as he was in the Canar coming down to rape, burn, and pillage, or was it burn, rape, and pillage? Well, so he just remembered the poem. The poem that he would remember is pissing in your boot won't keep you warm for long. Okay? That's the oldest poem in the English language. Sorry to have to tell you that, but you get a doctorate for knowing stuff like that. I'm an Anglo-Saxonist as well as a medievalist, and I write poetry. The very small poems that I've put, these are all drawn out by Paul Rouchet, Edward Rouchet's brother, and he designed this book. And I'm selling those for $5 a piece. They're little broadsheets. And the books are all going for $10 a piece, except for the big whopper, which weighs a kilo, 2.2 pounds, and it's 593 pages. I'm just going to read some of the little gnomics to begin with. Elementary is one of my favorites. Elementary. Finding you is like my first day at kindergarten when I discovered clay and couldn't keep my hands off it. It's a love poem. Domestic discovery, another love poem. When I came home, I saw that your toothbrush was missing, and I spent all night long looking until this morning when I found I was missing you. What must be said in so many conversations can't be explained in words. These are little gnomics. Don't worry about it. They're just supposed to go in there and rattle about. And I'm going to keep on reading a few of these. Diaphanous Deal. Diaphanous Deal. Whenever he talked to her, he put on invisible gloves. Roll on. I am a player piano. If you feel my keys, move with me. The tune is yours. The golden rule taken literarily. Speak unto others as you would had you been a poet. Edgar Allan Poe said in his essay on composition, which I used to bore my students with it was about 40 pages long, telling how he wrote The Raven. And as we know, Celador and Nevermore are the most poetic words in English. But love is the topic, and lost love, of course, forevermore is the most important part of a poetic exercise. But this is just called love. Don't use that word, and it might last. Or so would you, if you weren't used so often. And to keep on playing that mode, flirtation. Flirtation. I think you want to like me more than you really do. No, I think I like you more than I want to. These are all little gnomics. I actually was told by some people they use this in their wedding ceremony. Good heavens, I've done that several times. Maybe I should have used it. It would have lasted longer. Mine never seemed to last more than a few years. If my fingers were dawn, I could fall asleep, alone knowing halfway around the world, I could awaken you. It's a spoof on the Homeric image. Here's a really powerful message. Knowing there are some terminal diseases provides hope for all of us. I work in prisons. I've been working in prisons. I told you I first went to Spain 49 years ago. And I keep going back there every year. I spend a lot of time in Spain. But I also spend a lot of time inside the clink in prisons. I've been going to prisons all over the world since 1965, 51 years. I was down there this week. I'll be down there again. And this poem became popular in prisons in their journals all over America when I started the underground newspaper with the ex-convicts from McAllister State Prison, which had a riot and many people were killed, and we tried to get word out of Oklahoma. I had to go to England to get Simon Winchester to come over and finally get UPI and AP to pick it up, and we saved those men and rebuilt the prison. But anyway, this was printed and reprinted in journals all over prisons in America, and it's called A Poet's Conviction. I wrote it. A poet must be felonious, anything less, and he will miss the meaning of being more than a man, an animal, bounty on his hiding in his word hoard, roaring in the night, torment to all, the silent majority especially, dangerous and armed only with the dark root of a scream. Strikes dead the moribund, shattering to silence the radio mind's programming commercials we strive by. Criminally intent, undermining all pretense, short of life sentence and no time off for good behavior. I know many men inside who have been denied parole again and again, and it breaks my heart. My great political ideal was a man named Eugene Debs. He stood for the Socialist Party, and he was put into prison by Wilson because he criticized Wilson for taking us to war. But when he was released by the next president, he said, "You're one of the great Americans." But he died of tuberculosis, contracted in prison. His political principle is, as long as there's poverty, I'm a poor man. As long as there's a lower class, I'm a member of it. And as long as anyone is in prison, my soul is not free. I feel very strongly about helping people in prison. The most dangerous thing is thinking you know what you're saying. Now there's some little gnomic type verses. Take it lying down. You thought I said what I know you think will never stop unless we agree only to lie down, talking only with our bodies agreeing. Cerebral separation. Whenever I lose my mind, I feel so all alone, I get scared. So when it returns, the shock of renewing our acquaintance makes me wish we had remained separated or begun divorce proceedings. My line. Watch out. He might insert a poem instead, or look that way when you know it must be serious. Under the skin. You brought magic into my life, my bed, my kitchen, and my underwear even needs changing out. Hen farts. When the hen farts, I wonder how the rooster can crow, and especially now I don't want to even get up or have to tell you I care about the square root of Tibet, your bad breath, or anything else connected with what we used to call making love. Don't you ever feel like a dwarf with a drill press, formidable yet frightened that the plug you pull may be your own and the drain you see may be your home? And don't you ever let it get you down or even repeat what I told you, don't you ever. Shake a leg. Poetry in our fingers, clawing way inside, trying to find words that will do the walking for us. See it now. A girl in my sweater, feeling it better than I should care to remember how tight it was or how we wore each other out. At sword's point in a narrow bed. These aren't exactly for Hallmark cards, are they? At sword's point in a narrow bed. For what you've done to me, homicide would be a half measure only, suicide a grave avoidance. Yet staying together, terminal in a degree beyond despairing of the darkest horrors by the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, Stalin in Mongolia, Mao in Tibet, or your hair curlers versus my cigars. Hombre, hembra. Hombre is man. Hombre is hungry. Hembra is woman, but a woman of the lustful stamp. Hombre, hembra. Subtitle, Olor, smell of olé. Olé means voila. Means shazam. She, I once knew, whose name I cannot remember, but do remember the smell of coming into her when it's like coming out of the forest. Wet from a flat, dry plain, yet the same smell I know I shall always remember in these dry times, especially when I come so often to you I cannot remember my own name, but only remember what I forget to name or be with again. This is ellipses, ... Thank you, ma'am. Middle-aged hairdressers, whimpering through the menopause, between rinses and used car commercials on AM radio any old day in a long August, just about the time the air conditioner decides to go on the blink and all hot flashes make the latest love-lorning ballads about as helpful as the dust storm blowing up to redden the sky, only a shade lighter now than the last tint in the sink, draining out to those parched prairies where girls may wither and flush, then paint and backbrush, but would never stop to blush at all of the nonsense that keeps them parading in hair curlers at the supermarket before that never so special cowboy in rainbow-flecked, genuine, four-wheel, high boot, genuine, Saturday night, all-American romance. That's Oklahoma for you. Grow up and see the etchings. I'm told women grow old in the wrong places at a certain time and stare at their faces over much at times that once drew men, but then began to show blood in those tiny spaces around the nose. Also, I'm told they worry about these things much more than the men who grow to grace, thin, thoughtful, remembering the women who cursed then and cut the deepest lines of all in their hearts. This is a poem called Timor Mortis Canturbat Me. Timor Mortis Canturbat Me is a poem that was written in about 1480 in Scotland. Timor, fear, Canturbat, Me, Mortis. Fear of death, it makes me uncomfortable. And this is me trying to avoid certain memories. No, thank you. Thank you, but no tropical fruit juice in mine, please. I never try it. I mean, I try never to remember the tropics. Even here, the springtime stirs flavors, tastes, smells. I'd rather not remember that island just off Java. No, coffee either. Thank you. I try not to get too excited by stirring memories of Bali, that bower of bliss we called our grass hut. There were moments I try not to remember. The Chinese coins hanging from the bamboo above the bed where we slept, rarely thinking of leaving our bodies, making love with the jungle surrounding our yelps of pleasure, groans of dispensing satisfaction beyond the limits of the sea. So close we heard the soft murmur of the surf lapping our intertwining body, moving with that floating landscape, roaring to the volcano stirring of the eruption in the mountain. When the natives ask us, did you not feel the boom, boom, boom? Their name for the earthquake, not noticed in our own upheavals. Smiling to remember if we cared, to try to recall if we ever can. Again, I'd rather not have anything to drink that might remind me of those tropics, the nights and days, joined as we were in the Indonesian archipelago, stretching back to the South China Sea, by any flavor of Java, stirring memories I try never to taste, smell, feel. I never try thank you, but no thank you, please.
Wow.
I once trained for the priesthood and was disqualified as the Bishop of Los Angeles just before ordination. Probably one of the best things that ever happened for organized religion. But I really like, don't you see, I love dressing like this. This is my, what I call my Transylvanian drum major suit. I bought it in Hungary, and I love to have this. I think it gives that effect. And sometimes when I'm going through customs, they will call me Padre and think that I am. That's why I dress that way when I travel. This one is for all of my friends who just get, somebody said I've been born again, Mom, and she said, what are you trying to do? I've been your own woman. This is called Born Again and Again and Then. And if anybody has a religion that they feel nervous about, well, find another religion. What's it Woody Guthrie said when he was asked, what do you believe in? Woody said, all or nothing. Woody's my man. Born again and again and then, just before they took him, he looked at me knowing, saying, I shall never be far away. Whenever a dog should pee on your leg, I'll be there. If you continue to wake alone and shivering with horror, screaming, I shall be by your side. And when they tell you it is incurable and you finally accept that you've infected those you love most and you remember how I caused it all, that the first symptoms appeared shortly after we met and then you scoffed, you will know for certain that my gift was true, though terminal. And so maybe now someone somewhere will build a temple, write a creed, sing hymns, and perform more miracles to take the boredom out of your youth, exaggerated to say the least, or capriciously hollow at best, and altogether inappropriate to farewell, and certainly no basis upon which to build a friendship or religion. And no bird sang as even the lightning returned to its cloud with clumsy shame. I did find a very deep relationship once. It was called a Mini Morris, and I drove it all over Europe, and now it's become a very popular automobile. And I wrote this poem on the anniversary, I think, of the 50th anniversary of the manufacture of the Mini Morris, and I sent it to them, and they sent me a little toy Mini Morris. But it's the only really true love that I've ever been able to get. Well, I just want you to hear that I do know what love is all about, all right? This is called, well, and it's a spoof on, if you know William Butler Yeats, he wrote, Most secret and violet multifoliate rose, enfold me in your hour of hours. This one is, Most secretly in violet multifoliate many, enfold me in your power of horses. For William Butler Yeats and the Morris Corporation, United Kingdom Limited. Denial disappeared, fleeing like the chill in his last lover's eye as the sun now penetrated the plaza, washing away sadness from the shadowed corners of his mind as his Mini Morris glinted, laughing sunbeams at him, sitting at the sidewalk cafe, warming inside himself to hot chocolate, rushing joy in recognizing transformation in his car, his steadfast, ever loyal, speedy, sweet, and virtually indestructible pal, Mini Morris, my messenger of mankind's salvation, your horn trumpeting all the harmonies of reason. Shamless envoy of love and trust, I pledge thee my deathless troth, and thank all the gods that you drove me away from her faithless presence. That woman untrue, my last fleshly companion, I tremble now, united with your tested metal, protective bumper, clear windshield, powerful motor orgasms rising with a switch of ignition to speed me to new encounters, yet when left behind in their frail human era, you and I will roar petrochemically higher and away in our indomitable, mechanically patent selves. I have to move forward, but I'm trying to watch our time here, and so I just want to read the preface to Flamenco Fugue. I don't know how many of you know that a fugue is, of course, a digression of the theme of music, or it can also be a psychological aberration, a psychotic fugue, where you trip out, as some people used to do on a substance known as LSD, which we were using with terminal cancer patients, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead until it was made illegal, as you all know, in September 14, 1966. But that's another story. Anyway, this is my book called Flamenco Fugues. And my life has been a flamenco. Flamenco means Flemish. The Flemish are the greatest makers of tapestries. In Spanish, the word for tapestry, the woven craft of Flemish artisans, is, this is actually heavy reading, so I'm going to do something a bit lighter. But this is actually my life, the threads put together. From the backside of the tapestry, it looks like a coagulated conglomerate of nothing but knotted nonsense. On the front, you see the pattern, and that is my life. That's why it's called Flamenco Fugues. And I've been making digressions from the normal theme of life, from the basic context of life, out all over the world and out to other experiences, some of them chemically induced, I must say, with psychedelic drugs. And I don't use them anymore, and I don't use alcohol. Actually, I'm clean sober 34 years. I find that pretty remarkable. Well, I've had 4 skull fractures and 5 concussions, I can't keep track of it. And my head is wired together, it was put together by the English at a hospital in London. So I pick up messages from planets that haven't even been discovered yet. My last book, and I want to finish with this, is called Duende. Duende is that moment in the corrida when the bullfighter is performing the faena, the moment of truth, with the muleta, the small cape and the sword, and the horns come so close. I have been with bullfighters afterwards in their rooms and seen the marks that only a few of us saw. But at that moment, people go, ole, because it's a moment close to death, but a moment of renewed life. In the flamenco dancing, that moment when the 2 people on stage seem as if they have actually made love, people go, ole. Duende. When the word duende appears in literary contexts, when often one may be reminded of the essay by that title written by the Spanish poet Federico Garcia Lorca, and the simplest definition of the meaning is expressed in the explanation of ole. I go on to then talk about, in this introduction, and again, I'm almost seeing that it may be, sounding just too prosaic. It's funny, when I was teaching writing, when people discover they've been speaking prose all their lives. But poetry is what we reach for, and we cannot call ourselves poets, only others can. I'm going to read, actually, a moment which was extremely meaningful to me. When I was a sailor. I'm not only a qualified, sounds funny, unrestricted line combat officer in the United States Navy. I was in the Navy a long time, I was on all kinds of ships all over the world, but I'm also what they call a blue water sailor. And when you go outside of land in the blue water and you are comfortable and you then become qualified, that is a whole different state of being. I did my first actual blue water sailing up into the North Sea, through the Baltic to Copenhagen, back down through the Channel. But we went into the North Sea off the Frisian Islands while they were still completely covered with mines, which the Germans left there in World War II. They were enjoined to finally clear them all out. They're now clear. I've gone there with actually in a fast frigate only 2 years ago on the way to Copenhagen, the 5th anniversary. Doesn't matter. I was on a fast frigate with the United States Navy and they were all clear. But at this time, there was only one narrow channel through the minefields. And we were caught in a force 11, force 12 storm. That's 100 to 110, 120 miles an hour, where the trough to the crest is 40 feet. That's a 4-story building, and it is incredible. 20 other boats went down, taking everybody to the bottom. Drowned. We made it. That day I was harnessed to the wheel aft of the mizzenmast on the 50-foot catch, knocking 2. In a Buford scale 11 gale, gusting to force 12, winds of 110 miles an hour to 120 and more. When seas whose trough rose to crests over 40 feet in height as the boat sludged through the dark, turbulent waters on bare poles. That's the nautical term for reefing, that's tying down all the sails to the masts and booms. And both six-cylinder diesel engines were providing full power to our screws, our propellers, driving us through the blasting, blistering, raging, and punishing storm on the North Sea minefield. Nobody knew whether they were compact, sonic, or pressure-activated explosives, as they'd been left there by the German Navy in World War II, over 2 decades before. Several miles off the Frisian islands of northern Germany, one of which, Borkum, became our refuge harbor. Finally, after over 12 hours of enduring these combined threats, yet making our way through to close at last on the quay, where we made fast our mooring there, as over 20 other boats and ships had sunk, they had not made it, having gone under, sinking to the bottom of the sea with all hands lost. I had been spelled at the helm every 15 minutes by either David Dale, my fellow crew member, or Sam Coffing, the owner and captain, and I had gulped hot coffee or whiskey, Jack Daniels, Black Label, straight from the neck of the bottle when I was down below, forward of the cockpit in the main saloon, where Susie, David's partner, and Marianne, my fiancée, were stationed out of harm's way, although Marianne's nose was broken by her being tossed bodily across the space in the bulkhead. Yet she had made no complaint and held a dish towel with crushed ice to her face to staunch the pain. And ever after, in our years of companionship and subsequent marriage, I always looked on her otherwise refined patrician mane at that crooked bridge of that nose with nostalgic affection, triggering repeatedly my treasuring of Duende for that perfect storm, an irreplaceable, inimitable moment of peak survivalist awareness. And although I distinctly recall extended reveries experienced while stationed at the boat's helm, strapped to that wheel in the cockpit, as the yacht rolled over again and again to sink her gunnels into the dark waters, immersing that portion of the decks into the yawning deep, so that it seemed miraculous that the entire vessel would right herself and swing back to the other side in the same violent sweep. The masts, plural, making a 45-degree angle against the jagged horizontal plane, and the moment, quote unquote, as it's called in nautical parlance, taking no more than 4 to 5 seconds as I counted it out, 1 crocodile, 2 crocodile, 3 crocodile, 4, for it to swing back. We were proceeding into full power by those twin diesels before the wind, just enough way being made so that the sea did not roll over our stern, swamping the cockpit. Neptune's jaws gaping courageously at our hind parts. The roar of the wind in the bare poles, whose stays had been made fast, played a cacophonous, slapping, high-pitched Spike Jones paean to our destiny and possible termination in being gobbled whole by that prodigious liquid power. Poseidon was so often depicted as a giant with wrathful physiognomy. I also envisioned, some small thanks to my passion for Spanish corrida bullfights, a raging bull of impersonal brute force and preternatural power. Our communion of hot food and cold drink that night, when we were at last tied securely at Borkum's dockside, was punctuated by David Dale's recounting how half the spectators turned and walked away as our boat slammed into that stone mooring. They had lost their wager that we would capsize and go down even as we had breached the harbor and finally found refuge. Their bets were forfeit as our own lives were redeemed. Sam broke out the most precious brandy that evening, a 30-year-old rarity that he'd been saving for our run in Copenhagen, and ironically, we quaffed from this bottle once more in the midst of our transit of the Baltic only a few days later, when I misnavigated into East German minefields and then set a reverse course. Anyway, I won't go on. I tell also of surviving a tornado in a small boat in Lake Erie when the Coast Guard could not come out, and they guided me in by radio, and I actually came through it. They couldn't come out because it was just that rugged. I've also written this book about surviving a crash landing at Kennedy in an Air France airplane. I've had the great fortune, and it was funny because I wrote my samurai poem and put it in a piece of tinfoil, stuck it in my t-shirt and tucked it under a sweater, thinking that when they found my charred body, they'd find my samurai haiku. And it's in the last, it's the last poem. Where the hell did I put it? Oh yeah, it's the last poem in this book, and it's called "My Last Words." And here it is. My last words were so angry I could not hear my last words. Those are my last words to you. I haven't given a reading for 11 years. My last one was in 1972 at the at the National Poetry Society. I was covered by Capital Radio and BBC, and it was the last time I've ever given a public reading over there. Thank you. Thank you, Ben Wright.